Hi, I'm ZGALA the Art Angel. This is the 8 Dragon Room. Pretty sure that's not exactly how you're supposed to use that Tibetan sound bowl, singing bowl. I'll do it mo better. I'll do it the way it's generally played at the end of the video. Stay tuned for that if you're interested. And today I want to talk about, this is a special short session of the Authentic Action podcast, as well as hopefully an entertaining video for my YouTube channel. And I'm going to be talking about papercrete, which is what the majority of this structure around me is built with, and what I've been building with to various degrees off and on for, I guess it's been more than a decade now. Wow. And I want to talk about how papercrete is like clay, how it's like clay, how it's not like clay. Basically, just 3 ways that papercrete is not like clay, and correspondingly 3 ways that papercrete is like clay. Ready? Let's go. Papercrete is not like clay in that if you trap air in it, it won't explode in the kiln, which is true of clay, at least like actual clay, like the kind that you put in a kiln. So you don't have to worry about trapping air to the same degree that you do with clay. So papercrete is not like clay in that way. And papercrete is like clay in that it will crack where you try to build what's called a cold seam, where it's already started to cure, it's dried out, and then you add, if you don't do something to adhere it, it will generally crack there. And that is very much similar to, very much like clay. So that's 1-to-1. Papercrete is like clay, and then it will crack along a cold seam, let's call it, for lack of a better word. Number 2, papercrete is not like clay in that it's not reversible once it's dried or started to cure, basically. Once all the water, even though it's not heated, there is a chemical reaction that's happening in the papercrete with the lime and the cellulose from the paper, and the little bit of concrete usually put in there, all catalyze this chemical reaction, so that once it's started to dry out, it's really not reversible. You can't pulverize it back into reusable material. Unlike clay, which if it's just what they call bone dry, where you've, like, say you've made an ashtray or a bowl or a bone sculpture, and then instead of putting it in the kiln and making it a permanent thing, you want to just recycle it, you can, like, crush that back down into powder and probably sift it, go through some things. No, the chemistry of it will be important, but ultimately it's somewhat reversible even once it's bone dry, as it's called. But papercrete is not that way. In a way that papercrete is like clay, so number 2 on that side, is that it has a very long work time if you continue to keep it wet. So you can postpone that drying and that chemical reaction quite a while, quite a bit longer than you can with straight concrete, which starts to heat itself up internally and have a chemical reaction. So papercrete is more like clay in that you can extend the work time by keeping it wet, by keeping plastic on it, insulating it from drying out. And it's not infinite or indefinite, but there is a much longer work time than with regular concrete. It's one of the reasons I like to work with papercrete. It gives you a longer work time. Of course, there's advantages and disadvantages to all of these things. I'm just talking about how papercrete is not like clay and how papercrete is like clay. So number 3 way that papercrete is not like clay is that it's not dependent on particle size in order to be papercrete or to be workable papercrete. There's a wide variety, in fact, of particle size that one can use, from like whole paper to pulp up or shredded paper of various sizes, and depending on how much you process it is gonna affect the ultimate texture of it. But it is not the particle size itself which is creating the stickiness of it. It's the chemistry, I think. Now that I said that, I'm like, wait, is it? Well, you can let me know in the comments. I could be wrong on that, but not in the same way that clay is. In that clay is really what makes clay clay is its particle size. Under a certain particle size, it starts to like magnetically attract those particles. And there's all sorts of a variety of chemistry that clays can be, but what makes them all in that clay bracket is their particle size being under a certain amount. And what makes them sticky, that aspect that we know of to be clay, where you could like roll it up and make a snake, as it's called, where it sticks together, is the particle size. That's one of its main characteristics of clay, but it's not of papercrete, as far as I know. The little pinky finger asterisk. Number 3 way that papercrete is like clay is that it does have like an optical mix. So even though it is much more forgiving overall than cement or clay, papercrete still does have an optimal mix ratio, consistency for any given task or use. And the same is of clay. Like if you're doing slip casting, there's an optical, really soupy way you want your clay. Or if you're hand building, there's an optical, really sand heavy, not dried out, but on the dry side, easier to sculpt with kind of clay body. Or if you are throwing pots, you want something smooth usually, but also that will stand up. Again, depending on what you're making with it, there is an optical mix, and that is true of papercrete as well. There's an optical mix for your papercrete depending on what you're doing with it. That makes sense, doesn't it? So just to review, the 3 ways that papercrete is not like clay is that it won't explode if you trap air in it. It is not reversible once it's cured, and it is not dependent on particle size, or at least not alone, in order to be, like, to do its thing. I was going to say, to be papercrete isn't dependent on its particle size. 3 ways that papercrete is like clay is that it will crack if you don't do something to counteract a cold joint, is what we call something that's already started to cure or dry, at least along the edges. And so it's best to work in one foul swoop. I think that's probably from my great grandmother or something. Anyway, in a single pour, it's best to avoid what's often called cold joints in cement work. And you can avoid that longer by covering the work with plastic, spraying it for a while. You can stave off that drying process. And if you don't manage to avoid that drying process on an edge, then you need to think about some sort of glue, some sort of adhesion enhancement in order to avoid that almost inevitable cracking that's going to want to go on. Number two way that papercrete is like clay is that it has a longer work time if you keep it wet. It can be kept, as I was just saying, can be kept moist for a while by some extra spraying and extra keeping plastic on it. And that is similar to if you're ever building a sculpture with clay, you can keep it workable for a longer time by treating it in a certain way. You can stave off that drying. And a third way that papercrete is like clay is that it has an optimal mix for any given use or job or thing that you're going to do with it. So depending on what you're going to build with it, make with it, how you're going to use it, will influence what that optical mix is. I would say papercrete is a little more forgiving about not hitting that optimal place and still giving you a good workability. I will save my 3 ways that papercrete is, I just did the way that it's alike and different from clay, and I have been thinking about a Udemy course. You can let me know in the comments if that's of interest to you. You can subscribe to my email. I have a lot of knowledge dancing around up in here about papercrete and its many uses, and there's of course still much to be discovered, and so I welcome anyone else who wants to share any knowledge that you have about papercrete. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I appreciate it if you do. This has been an extra short for the Authentic Action podcast, the creative series, and also for my YouTube channel. I'm ZGALA, the Art Angel, and this is the way you actually play a Tibetan singing bowl.